Okay, so I'm starting the recording. So this is our third car session so far in the prep course. So I like to start off with just like a brief weekly check-in and how your car's journey has been going so far. So let me know what you guys find most difficult in cars, and especially since we're a small group, we can definitely focus more on those strategies today. So do you guys feel like you need to work on pacing or timing for cars passages? What do you find the most difficult?
I can't really share my opinion on this. It's my first cars session.
Oh, okay, awesome. Got it. Jennifer, do you have anything to add? If not, I'll just give a brief overview then of cars in general. Okay, awesome. So, and feel free to use the chat if you guys don't want to unmute yourself. But in general, I recommend just taking a diagnostic test for the CAR score. And depending on the score you get, so if it's less than 125, I would really recommend just focusing on your reading comprehension skills and use those third passage parties to build those up. So those are like your Jack Weston passages, Kaplan, Princeton, or Khan Academy. So those are good free passages that you can find and work on just reading those passages and understanding. And then after that, I would definitely build upon those skills and then start doing the double AMC passages. You really want to save those for last because those are the best material that you want to work with towards the end of your prep. Okay, so this is kind of how I focused on addressing cars. So I like to personally read the question first because then that gives you a perspective into what you need to know from the passage so you know where to kind of slow down and where to read more carefully. So, reading the questions and rewording it in my own words really helped me when I was doing the cars passages. And then after you read the passage and then you go back to the questions, you kind of want to predict the answer, what you think, before looking at the answer choices. And you want to do this because sometimes there's one word that seems really convincing and can throw you off. But if you have a general idea of what the answer should be, you'll be more wary about choices that seem really convincing but are actually incorrect. So just thinking about the answer or predicting it can really help you understand where to look for the answer. And then you want to definitely use like the process of elimination if any of the answer choices are too extreme or they don't address the question that you're trying to actually look at. That's definitely going to be something that you can eliminate off the bat. And then if you've used all of these strategies and you still haven't found the answer, then you want to look back at the passage and try to find evidence on where that question answer might come from. And if you look at the passage, you want to read a little bit above and then a little bit below too, because you want to get a general idea of what the answer can be. Sometimes it's not always in that paragraph that they tell you to go look to. And number 6 is really important. You want to choose the best answer to the question that's asked. So sometimes the answers are going to be right, like, yes, that's based off the passage, but it's not addressing the right question. So you really want to be wary about things like that because sometimes the answer choices are true and they can apply, but they're not answering the right question. Does that make sense? Do you guys have any questions on these strategies?
No, that makes sense.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so I'll go over the types of questions we see on Cars passages mostly and understanding how how you can understand what type of question it is and what strategies to use. And then you want to focus on getting the most amount of questions correct to get a better score, obviously. So that can help you like eliminate the answers, which is definitely a key part if you're running out of time. So um, we'll go on to the questions now. So most questions are going to be based on comprehension. So these are like your direct questions. Like, have you, it's going to be direct from the passage. Did you understand the passage? So these are something that you can definitely answer super easily. And then there's going to be reasoning within the text. So these questions are going to come from within the text, within the paragraph somewhere. And you need to go back and read and apply that knowledge. And one thing that is important, you don't want to apply any outside knowledge to these questions. So sometimes if you're reading a history passage, you're like, oh, yeah, this did happen. But if it doesn't mention it in the passage, don't bring that outside knowledge to it because they will put an answer choice with outside knowledge and you'll be like, yeah, this is true. And you definitely want to avoid that because if it's not in the passage, you don't want to pick something like that. And then reasoning beyond the text. These are questions where they ask you to infer and make an opinion based on something that is not discussed in the passage specifically. So sometimes these can be the author's opinion on a different topic that's not discussed in the passage, but you apply the same type of knowledge from the passage itself. So these are the three basic types of questions that you can see in a Cars passage. Okay, so now we'll go over more of those. Okay, so comprehension is usually straight from the passage that I've mentioned. And make sure you refer back to the text. So if you're having trouble answering the question, you can most likely find it in the passage. And we'll go over how to read the passage carefully and how to use the best highlighting tips and how to read in a bit. But I just want to address these types of questions first. So and make sure you don't overthink the question. So just find the evidence and stick to what you know, and definitely don't use any out of scope knowledge. And then stick to the bottom line of the passage. When I say bottom line, I mean what is the basic summary of the passage. And whenever you're stuck, just stick to that basic summary and find the best answer choice that addresses that summary in that passage. Okay, this is another type of a question. Except and least. So these are questions like the passage provides all of the following except blah, blah, blah. So you want to keep a track of what is true and what is false. So what I like to do is you read A and you're like, yes, this was mentioned in the passage. I can find it here in paragraph 1. Or you go to B, you're like, oh, this is not mentioned in the passage. That's false. So just by writing it down, the easiest way to see is the one that stands out. And then you pick that answer choice. Um, Sometimes if you try to do this in your head, you forget or you can't keep track of it. So I just like to write it down. You have your whiteboard next to you, so it's really easy to just make a note and not confuse any of the answer choices. So inference questions. So these are your questions that refer to authors' opinions about anything that's discussed outside of the passage, um, and things like that. So these are questions that say what can be inferred, what can be concluded from this statement, or what does the author suggest about this, and which is supported by the author. So these are like the most basic inference questions that come up in cars. Okay, just give me one moment. I'll be right back. Okay, sorry, I'm back. So the next type of questions are your strengthen and weaken questions. So they usually ask what can be added to the passage that would strengthen it, or what would weaken the passage. So these can be really tricky sometimes, especially if you didn't understand the passage correctly. So you really want to work on addressing what the passage is talking about, and I'll let you know how you can do that. But strength is anything that adds to the author's point and supports the passage. And you want to look for positive answers and eliminate the negative ones. And weaken, it takes away from the author or contradicts something is saying. So you want to look for the negative ones. Okay, and I think I wrote an example, but I didn't include the choices. So I'll try to look for another example, but let's go over this practice. We can do this one together, and then I'll give you guys one to do after this. Does that sound okay?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Okay, can you see my screen again?
Yes, we can.
Okay, awesome. So what I like to do is first go over the question. So based on the passage, the author's ideal world would be best described as one in which, so this is asking about the author's ideal world. So it's kind of a basic question that we should be able to find from the passage. Okay, the claim that the elderly have diverse wants and requirements is based mainly on, okay, so now we get to know that we're going to be talking about the elderly and their diverse wants and requirements. What is the author's response to the standard approach to designing housing for the elderly? So we want to focus on the author's response and to the standard approach of housing. And this is also a basic question. So this is asking for this bottom line of the passage. So once we write down the bottom line, we can understand what the main passage was talking about. And the word residential is used in the sense of. So it helps to read the questions because then you know where to look in the passage and where to stop at. So now we know that the word residential, that when we see it, we should definitely keep that in mind. And the understood approach to housing for the elderly that Bradford Perkins suggests needs to be changed. So something he said that needs to be changed. Okay. And it's good to definitely highlight proper nouns that show up so you know where they came up in the passage. Okay, so now we'll go over the passage and read it together. Okay, the building industry has caught on to the fact that America's fast-growing elderly population represents a lucrative niche market. For more than a decade, builders have been turning out efficient, streamlined communities for golden agers and active adults. But much of the housing built for residents aged 65 and older remains a depressing wasteland of leisure wells and shady acre subdivisions. Planned developments where older Americans are put out to pasture and cut off from the social patterns they've known all their lives. Okay, low-income housing for the elderly is often rigid and institutional, and upscale housing for affluent elderly residents can be more vulgar in its imagery and predictability. So this paragraph saying that Builders are making efficient, streamlined communities, but they're kind of depressing for the people that they're living in. And let's see if I can annotate. How do I write? Whiteboard. Just give me one moment. I'm trying to figure out how to use the whiteboard. Okay, never mind. I don't think I can write, but okay. So I like to usually come up with a one word that describes the paragraph one. So what's a good word that can represent what paragraph one was talking about? Not one word, like 1 to 3 words, like super easy to tell. So if we have to go back to paragraph one, we know what it was talking about. So so what I'm gonna write is builders are making efficient housing. So I just wrote down builders and efficient. So if we want to go back to that, we know that in paragraph one, we were talking about builders and how they're making efficient landing. Okay, but the biggest problem with housing for seniors is that much of it has been designed as if the market were one monolithic great block, and if all older people had the same needs and desires. So this is a problem, and that's what we're not addressing. So, but that's not the case, stresses architect Victor, Dean of Architecture School. Our long-term care system appears single-minded, inflexible, uncoordinated. The classic one-shoe-fits-all mentality. It suffers from a lack of imaginative ideas that integrate the family and community and caregiving. We need to try different types and sizes of settings to better understand what works effectively for a diverse group of older people with a diverse range of needs. So paragraph two, I would write down diversity is needed. And if we get asked a question about diversity, we know we go back to paragraph two. Make sense? Okay, so paragraph three. So we have paragraph three saying that experts argue that designing environments for aging individuals means designing for people with a wide range of abilities, not one average user. So a supportive environment is critical for the elderly, and all older people benefit when their surroundings help them work and community roles and extend their activity beyond their immediate living quarters. Architects must think of housing and the elderly in terms of giving them residential spaces. Experts in the field contend that the most commonly experienced effects of aging, all these effects can be mitigated by sensitive design. So now we're saying we have experts in the field that are backing this up, saying that we do need it, and why architects are supposed to change these residential spaces. So we kind of get the author's opinion here and how he's backing it up by saying there's a lot of experts in the field that argue that we need more better design for elderly. So architects around the country must take the lead to rethink rules and regulations that constrain creativity and discourage experimentation. Many cities with single-use zoning, nursing homes are not permitted to be constructed in residential areas, even though they are largely residential. Anytime housing for the elderly includes healthcare, the code treats it as an institution first and housing second. And we have another architect here. And it's difficult to make a home out of a hospital. So in paragraph four, we're talking about how, sorry, I lost my train of thought. How architects need to take the lead and make better housing again. And we also have an example from this architect here. Architects are learning more about design for aging by studying successful projects and meeting with users. So that's good. They're meeting with users. And they're spending time in wheelchairs to learn firsthand what it's like to live with physical impairments. Many are paying more attention to the benefits of outdoor spaces. These allow them to design spaces for elderly that are better tailored to how they live. So this is letting us know what's happening now so that architects are taking the next step. So they are studying successful projects. They're learning firsthand what to do, and they're paying more attention to other things that are needed for elderly. So in paragraph 5, I would write that's reform. So we're talking more about reforms that are happening now. And the last paragraph. So, but the greatest single reform would come if architects simply change their attitudes about the design for aging and regard their entire field as service-enriched housing rather than institutionalized healthcare. So changing their mindset would free them to experiment in ways that they can't with more formulaic healthcare design. It's residential with services, not healthcare with decorating, stresses Bradford Perkins. So we heard about him in the last question, so I'm going to highlight that quote. So we also get the author's opinion and experts here. So we want to make a note of that. Okay, so do you guys understand how I went through the passage? And I know I did that really quickly, but let me know if you have any questions on the passage and if you want me to explain anything again.
No, you went through it well. I could understand what you were talking about.
Awesome, cool. So now we'll move on to the questions. Okay, so the understood approach to housing for the elderly that Bradford Perkins suggests needs to be changed is, so we'll go through all of these first. But in your, sorry, what was I saying? Like, remember when I said predict the answer? You want to predict your answer. So I'm going to think that, okay, Bradford Perkins, he was suggesting what needs to be changed. That our healthcare is not healthcare. It needs to be more residential and making sure that elderly have spaces for them. So we want to think about that answer when we look at these answer choices. Okay, so A, providing the elderly with attractive houses. So I don't think it's more about attractive houses, it's more about residential and having more space for them that is actually usable for them and diverse range of needs and able to cover that. So I don't think it's really attractive. So I'm going to eliminate that. Okay, prioritizing the medical needs of the aged. And remember that this is what needs to be changed. So he didn't say that we need to change that, we don't need to give them attractive houses. Okay, so does the medical needs of the aged need to be changed? Yes, so he was saying that is residential and not healthcare with decorating. So we do need to change how much we prioritize the medical needs. So that is an okay answer. So I'm going to keep that. Okay, and what needs to be changed? Ensuring old people have comfortable houses? No, we still want to make sure they have comfortable houses. And giving new experiences to the elderly. So that goes back to paragraph 2, where we talked about being diverse. So if you're giving them new experiences, that's a good thing, and that doesn't need to be changed. So the best answer here would be B, that we should change the attitude and make it less about the healthcare, but more about the living in the elderly housing. And feel free to stop me if I'm going too fast or you would have picked a different answer choice. We can go through it again. Okay, so the word Residential is used in the sense of, okay, so we have that word in paragraph 3. So first we can think about what residential meant in the passage. So the author was talking about more having sensitive design in this paragraph, having different types of housing and different needs. So we want to think about that answer choice. So residential, he was not talking about like urban spaces or rural or anything like that. Personalized living spaces, that does seem like a good idea. And suburban, no, we were not talking about anything like that. Again, and already occupied domiciles. I don't think he was talking about that either. So the best answer choice is going to be B, based on the passage, just thinking about having better designing and better suited towards individuals and not making it super efficient like architects are doing currently. Okay, the author's central thesis is that, okay, so basically the author in the whole passage was trying to say that we need to change the housing, we need to make it more diverse, we need to have different needs for all of the elderly. It's not one size fits all. So we want to think of the best answer choice that goes with that. Okay, so A, architects, not healthcare workers, should design housing for senior citizens. Architects are already doing the designing, so that does not make sense. Okay, B, housing for the elderly must include plans for emergency healthcare. We didn't talk about emergency healthcare in this passage, so that goes to the trash. Okay, housing for senior citizens is not yet approached like normal housing design is. Okay, that's an okay answer too. We did talk about how um, is different and um, it's not as diverse. So that could be an okay answer. And okay, D, the rights of senior citizens are not well respected. Okay, we did not talk about any rights specifically. So I would stick with C, which addresses housing for senior citizens. Okay, makes sense? So we're at the halfway point. So let me know if any of those answers did not make sense or if you want me to go through any of them again.
No, they all made sense to me.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so what is the author's response to the standard approach to designing housing for the elderly? So, what was the author thinking about, or like what was his, uh, what do you call it, tone in the passage? Was he agreeing with, yes, we need to do a one size fits all, or should we, or did he not have an opinion, or did he say that we know we need the opposite? So he definitely was not accepting that. He said there definitely is better ways to house the elderly. Okay, and it was not neutral, so I would not say that. Critical. There are better ways to approach housing. Yes, that was definitely what was talked about in the passage. Was he discouraged? Most architects will fail to build adequate housing. So he wasn't saying that the architects will fail. He's saying they need to change their attitude, you know. So C would be the better answer choice. Okay, 2. The claim that the elderly have diverse wants and requirements is based mainly on. Okay, so what is that based on? That the elderly have diverse wants and requirements. So where did we talk about diversity? So remember, I said if we ever need to talk about, if we get a question on diversity, we will go back to paragraph 2. So that's going to be in paragraph 2. So we talked about the biggest problem that um, all the older people had the same needs and desires. That's what the market has looked like, but that's not the case. And we have um, we have the claim from the architect himself from this university, and he was providing all of this knowledge. So we have a direct quote from him, so that would be the best answer. So how much money is based mainly on how much money goes into the elderly? No, we didn't talk about that. The analysis of an architect. Yes, we talked about that in diversity. A list of needs that the elderly have. No, and we did not talk about if the elderly are dissatisfied. So that's kind of tricky because the author is pointing out all of these negatives, but we didn't talk about what the elderly actually think. We're getting a lot of the architect's point of view. So B is the best answer. Okay, last question. Based on the passage, the author's ideal world would be best described as one as which. Okay, so just thinking about to the main summary of the paragraph that the author wants diverse um, living for elderly, and he doesn't want it to be the same. We need to change that attitude. So let's find the best answer choice with that. So the age we're seen as a diverse group of individuals. Yes, we have the diversity in again, so that seems okay. More public places were designed to accommodate older people. That's also good because we're talking about more public spaces and design. The elderly were treated with more respect. We didn't really talk about respect or anything like that, so that can go away. And we also did not talk about keeping senior citizens from being homeless. Okay, so between A and B, what do you guys think is the better answer choice here? You guys can type it in the chat if you want.
I'm honestly not entirely sure. I feel like I could give points for both answers.
Okay, got it. Yeah, so yeah, both of them seem kind of tricky. So the ideal world would best be described as which the age we're seen as a diverse group of individuals. So this one is directly addressed in the passage. So this one is stronger, whereas this is just saying public spaces. We You want to be careful about each word. So we want to talk about housing, not just public spaces. We were directly talking about housing. And that's also the title at the bottom. So you want to if that said housing, that would definitely be the answer, but it says public spaces. So I'm not sure because we want to give them residential spaces where they live. So that is the reason why this is kind of out. Okay, and A is the better answer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that helps a lot actually. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so we do have 20 minutes, so let me know what you guys want to do. With that time, we can do another passage. You guys can do one on your own and I can go over it, or we can use the rest of time to talk about anything that you guys need help with. So let me know. But I will stop the recording and you guys can feel free to address any other questions.